Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Awesome Albums with Awesome Andrew. This is a long video, so let's get started. Today we're going to take a look at AC/DC's Back in Black, an album that turned 40 years old earlier this year. Before going any further, let's introduce the band. I'm going to intentionally skip over our lead singer for right now. It'll make sense, trust me. Angus Young on lead guitar, Malcolm Young on rhythm guitar and backing vocals, Cliff Williams on bass guitar and backing vocals, and Phil Rudd on drums. Again, you'll notice I didn't mention anyone who sang lead vocals. That's who I intentionally skipped over. Our story begins on July 27th, 1979. AC/DC released their fifth album, Highway to Hell, an album that was certified gold as we transitioned from the 70s into the 80s. Eventually, the album became certified 7 times platinum in the US for selling over 7 million copies and made it on many different countries' charts all over the world over the years. Then we fast forward to February 19th, 1980. Lead singer Bon Scott went on a drinking binge in a London pub that caused him to lose consciousness, so a friend let him rest back at his place overnight. The next morning, Scott was found unresponsive and was rushed to King's College Hospital, where medical personnel pronounced him dead on arrival. So some say he died during the night from the 18th and 19th, others say during the night of the 19th and 20th. It varies. This, as you can imagine, was a huge bombshell for the rest of the band. Angus was adamant that they wouldn't fly on the same plane as Scott's coffin, but a mix-up caused them to end up flying on the same plane after all. Their tour manager, Ian Jeffrey, remembers, "I could see this coffin on the runway, so I sat Angus down and said, 'I'll get your bag, don't worry about it.' Once I'd seen them take the thing off and take it away, I let Angus stand up. Thankfully it was dark, so there were lights on the belt coming out of the plane," end quote. The next morning, they went to Bon's parents' house to pay their respects. Jeffrey said by this time his poor parents had just been lambasted by the press, rockstar overdoses. His mom came out and she was totally what you'd think, so distraught, but she was so grateful for everyone coming. We went in there in the typical thing, sandwiches and cakes and a cup of tea, and she exploded when she got in there. Everything a grief you could ever imagine, as much as you could see somebody who's totally distraught. She'd set out 5 chairs for the band, and 4 had come in to sit down. She realized her son was dead, and that we'd come to tell her, because she'd been hiding for 2 days. It was a simple thing of laying 5 chairs out, and when she came to the 5th chair, it just gushed out like a waterfall. Everything you could imagine. I was effing distraught. I was so sorry for that woman, end quote. Cremation took place on Friday, February 29th, where the following day, Bon's ashes were buried in the Memorial Gardens. It was a very small service, just friends and family. No photographers or reporters were there. The day after the funeral, Phil Rudd and Cliff Williams went back to Melbourne for a break, and the Young brothers went with Ian Jeffrey and Peter Mensch, their manager, to London. Peter Mensch tried passing a possible list of replacement singers to Malcolm, only for the guitarist to wave him away. But you have 2 options at this point. Either give up now that your lead singer is dead, or replace him. They eventually decided it's time to look for a new singer, so they went through a list of candidates. Let's go ahead and run through some of them. Stevie Wright, former singer for George Young, Angus and Malcolm's brother, and Harry Vonda's old band, the Easy Beats, but was battling a lifelong addiction. Jimmy Barnes, singer for Cold Chisel, but since he was already established, they passed on him. They wanted somebody with no baggage. Angry Anderson, frontman of Rose Tattoo, who had a similar voice to Bon, but according to Jeffrey, all those guys in Australia, they were never in the equation. They were never going back there for another singer, end quote. Gary Holton, former singer for the Heavy Metal Kids and toured with AC/DC, but Robert John Mutt Lang, record producer, who was helping the band get through the candidates, didn't see this working out. Gary Pickford Hopkins, ex-singer in Wild Turkey, and an associate of Ian Jeffrey from his days of singing for Rick Wakeman. Pickford Hopkins had the right voice, but none of the charisma. But he still made it back on the Want Back list, basically round 2, before being beaten to the punch. Steve Parsons, formerly of Baker Gurvitz Army and worked with Andy Fraser's band After Free, called Sharks. Terry Slessor, another singer from a band AC/DC toured with, Backstreet Crawler, and had a strong chance of winning. His problem was when he was auditioning and sang through Whole Lotta Rosie, Highway to Hell, and The Jack, he refused to sing them again after Malcolm realized he hadn't turned the tape on to record them. Jeffrey said he kind of let himself down, end quote. Noddy Holder, frontman of Slade, but with the success of the band, they didn't think it would be possible to get him. Malcolm said, "People will just say, that's the singer of Slade. We can't have him even though we thought he would be effing brilliant," end quote. Brian Johnson, singer of the Newcastle glam rock group Geordie, who had a top 10 hit in the UK, All Because of You in 1972. Jeffrey wasn't too convinced about him, saying, "He's a effing big fat that word." Malcolm, however, insisted that they would track him down. At that time, Johnson was working for his brother's roofing company. In March of 1980, Johnson got a phone call about coming in to try out, but he said, "When I left Geordie, I was completely broke. I had nothing, and I had 2 kids and a mortgage to pay. I was driving a VW Beetle that was 14 years old. I was effing skint," end quote. He said, "I don't know too much about AC/DC. They were this cult band, but everybody was talking about them. I mean everybody. We used to play Whole Lotta Rosie, and we'd always save it for last because the place would go crazy, end quote. But he received a phone call from this German woman telling him that there was a band that was auditioning for a new singer being held in London and asked for him specifically. He asked for the name of the band because he wasn't going to go down there if he doesn't know who he's auditioning for, but she wasn't permitted to tell him. So he asked for the initials. She says, okay, it's AC and DC. Brian was hesitant, saying, I've been bitten once by the music industry and I didn't want it to happen again. He had a phone call from a friend saying, Brian, I have an advert I think would suit you fine. It's 350 pounds. Brian thought, hang on, I could probably go down and do the AC/DC thing on the same day. I thought, I hope I get this ad thing, because Andre did tell us, there's this big black soul woman, it's going to be you or her that gets it, end quote. Brian headed down there, but he didn't think his VW Beetle was up to the task, so he borrowed his friend's Toyota Crown, which got a flat tire on the way there. He makes it to the studio just in time to sing his friend's jingle.
The new high power compact from Hoover, it's a beautiful mover.
He then heads to his appointment with AC/DC. I was sitting in this little cafe just across from the studios, and God, it was miserable. I wanted to go home. I was too nervous to go over there. I just thought I hadn't got a chance of getting the gig because they don't know me, really. I thought, gosh, they'll be looking for somebody with long hair. It's not going to work. Plus, they're a young band. Accidental pun there. I remember getting this pie and a cup of tea and couldn't eat the pie because the crust was too hard. I was starving. I just went, oh, bollocks, better make a move. I got up and walked across the street. And that was it. That was me changed after that. I just remember the lads had been sitting there for quite a while for us. They'd been in that studio a long time auditioning singers. They were great. I'd never met a bunch of non-prats. They were just regular guys. As soon as I walked in, I just felt comfortable. Malcolm came over and said, there you go, mate, and gave me a bottle of brown ale. He said, you must be thirsty. I went, you know what? I could just kill this thing right now. And I did. Boy, did I. Brian went against the usual songs the other candidates suggested, going with an Ike and Tina Turner's Nutbush City Limits as opposed to Smoke on the Water that everyone else wanted to do. They did Whole Lotta Rosie. Rudd decided then and there that they had found their new singer. But Brian wasn't so sure and he went back home. He was brought back for a second audition. A few days later, Brian got a phone call from Malcolm. Brian said, I'll never forget it. It was my father's birthday, and I've been playing pool at the Crown Pub. I went back home, but there was nobody in the house. Mom and Pop had gone out somewhere, and the phone rang, and it was Mal. He said, we got an album to do. We got to leave in a couple weeks, so if you're set for it. I said, are you telling me I've got the job? And he went, oh, yeah. I said, I tell you what, mate. I'm going to put the phone down. Just ring again in 10 minutes, just so I'm sure that it's not someone just taking a piss. And he went, yeah, sure. And he phoned back on the dot and said, so are you coming? He still wouldn't say it. Mal's not like that. Well, are you coming or what? And I'm like, yeah. I put the phone down. I didn't want him to hear this, and I went, whoa, Ev. I just bought me Pop a bottle of whiskey for his birthday, and I just opened it and took a big swig of it. I was so excited, but I didn't know who to tell. There wasn't anybody home to tell, end quote. On April 1st, AC/DC announced Brian Johnson is officially their new singer. He told his younger brother, who laughed thinking it was just an April Fool's prank. They worked quickly to get this new album out. Brian helped write some songs, and by late April, they had 9 tracks completed. The band and Mutt Lange flew to NASA in the Bahamas to record their new album at Compass Point Studios. Brian said, it was hardly any kind of studio. We were in these little concrete cells. Comfy, mind you, had a bed and a chair. And this big old black lady ran the whole place. Oh, she was fearsome. She ruled the place with a rod of iron. We had to lock the doors at night because she warned us about these Haitians who'd come down at night and rob the place. So she bought us all these 6-foot fishing spears to keep at her effing door. It was a bit of a stretch from Newcastle, I can tell you, end quote. There was also an issue with their equipment being held up at customs, and their other gear was being slowly freighted over from the UK. Brian felt pressure during the process as he'd never recorded with the band before, and none of Scott's writing was used for the album's lyrics, as the group felt they would be seemingly profiting from his passing. Malcolm recalls Mutt Lange working a lot with Brian, saying, Mutt liked to work with Brian alone on the vocal side. That's the way he prefers to work. He'd call you in afterward and say, here's what I got today. You'd hear it and he'd say, how does that sound? It sounds great. Mutt can sing as high as Brian, so if Brian couldn't, it's too effing high for me. Mutt would go in and hit that high note and go, that's the one. So he had to work hard. He was put through the mill there, but he's getting plenty of pats on the back. He needed them, to be honest, because he would say, I'll be the scapegoat if this all goes wrong. We said, no, it's the band. This is a band. It's not Brian Johnson. It's the band here. We're all in that boat together. You're not on your own. You just got to do your best, mate, which is what he'd done, end quote. After the album was recorded, Malcolm traveled with Mutt Lange and Tony Platt to New York City to mix the album while the rest of the band flew back to London. Brian remembers, I'd never heard the finished album until 2 months later, but when I did, I was knocked out. I couldn't believe it. It was that good. A wonderful album, full of surprises, end quote. Back in Black was released on July 21st, 1980, 5 months and 1 day after Bon Scott's passing. After the tour came to an end in February of 1981, the band returned to Australia. After their gig in Sydney, Bon's mother told him, Our bond would have been so proud of you, son." Looking back, Brian said, "I don't think I could have done it unless it was those particular 4 boys. If it had been 4 other gentlemen, I don't think it could have happened. This is a special band. They do something to you," end quote. Now that we got our long history section out of the way, let's move on to the album cover. As you can see, it's a completely black album. The album was meant to be a tribute to Bon. Angus said, "Well, that was the whole idea. The cover was black and the album began with the sound of a tolling bell," end quote. He also said, "It was all there. We knew what we were going to call the album because it was our thing for Bon, Back in Black. We all knew that, and we wanted it in black. You tried convincing the record company when the front guys passed away that you want an album called Back in Black with a black sleeve." Malcolm interrupts, "And the record company sent you a pink jacket for it. We'd send the album back 6 times each week, and we said, when it comes back black, it'll be right. Black with nothing on it. We want it embossed so you don't need white lines on it, all without pictures. We settled in for a slight gray liner, so we managed to get virtually what we wanted," end quote. The back cover, as you'd expect, is also black with a list of songs, which aren't in the right order. Why do albums do that sometimes? Now that we have that out of the way, let's move on to the music. All the songs were written by Angus and Malcolm Young and Brian Johnson. What a way to start off an album with an ominous tolling bell. The idea came during the mixing at New York's Electric Lady Studios. Malcolm heard the bell from a church across the street. Tony Platt ran across the street to the church in Loughborough, but unfortunately a bunch of pigeons made that bell tower their home, and every time the bell tolled, it caused the pigeons to scatter. All that noise ruined the recording. Platt commissioned a custom-made bell from a specialist foundry in Leicestershire and recorded that one. Steve Cake, whose father worked at John Taylor Bell Founders, said, "Phone call came from a recording studio in the Bahamas. I was only a kid, of course, but the situation made me come in and nose around," end quote. I did read a discrepancy saying the bell made by Jay Taylor weighed 4 tons, and that was the one that Platt recorded for the album, but other sources say that it was a replica of the bell from the pigeon tower that was used on the album, and that one weighed 1.5 tons. The bell was then slowed down to achieve the ominous effect they were looking for. The bell tolls 13 times. After the 4th one, the opening guitar riff comes in. People are anxiously waiting what the new singer sounds like. I'm a rolling thunder, pouring rain. Brian Johnson recalls Mutt Lange coming into his room at Compass Point Studios telling him to write the lyrics for Hell's Bells. He said, "I'd just done Back in Black, so I thought, can it get any moodier?" And then right at that moment, there was a tropical thunderstorm, the likes of which I'd never seen before. Mutt said, "Listen, thunder." And I said, "That's a rolling thunder. That's what they call it in England." He said, "Rolling thunder. Write that down." And this is true. It went boom. The effing rain came down in torrents. You couldn't hear yourself. And I just went pouring rain. And then the wind herped up. I'm coming on like a hurricane. I was gone. The song was ready that night. I hadn't even heard the track because they were busy doing it. It was whacked down in the greatest haste, end quote. Another quote from Brian describing the process with Mutt saying, "It was like, again, Brian, again. Hold on, you sang that note too long, so there's no room to breathe." He wouldn't let anything go past him. He had this thing where he didn't want people to listen to the album down the road and say there's no way someone could sing like that. They've dropped that in, even the breaths had to be in the right place. And you cannot knock a man for that, but he drove me nuts. I'm sitting there going, "Ah," end quote. The single reached number 16 on France's IFOP chart in 1980, as well as number 50 on the US mainstream rock Billboard's chart. And last fact, some of the lyrics got some flack from religious groups and the PRMC, the Parents Music Resource Center, for the use of satanic imagery and lines like, "Hell's bells, Satan's coming for you." This song, based on the lyrics, is probably not talking about an actual gun, but rather sexual metaphors that Scott used to have so much fun with, but also with a somewhat libidinous point with a more simple fare with lines like, "All you women who want a man on the street, but you don't know which way you want to turn, just keep coming and put your hand out to me, because I'm the one who's going to make you burn." Brian recalled reading a British article about a neighborhood pusher who made daily rounds through the London suburbs, like a milkman, I guess, selling narcotics to bored, lonely, and depressed housewives. These housewives would then go to local clubs and bars seeking an extramarital relationship. The term "shoot to thrill" in this case was likely referring to diazepam or Valium, which is often given via injection to treat anxiety and depression. This plucked guitar part to me sounds like a precursor to the intro to the title track on their next album, For Those About to Rock. Check that out. In a recent interview, Angus Young commented that the song's breakdown, which occurs after the main solo, was inspired by the trio gun battle climax of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where Clint Eastwood, Lee Van Cleef and Eli Wallach stare at one another in the center of a Civil War cemetery, which leads into a shootout. Young said this sequence in the song was designed to mirror the actual soundtrack selection. Both compositions feature a quiet build-up, increasing in tension to a thunderous, cataclysmic finale. The title is pretty self-explanatory. It's about a materialistic woman due to the lines like, never gonna give it for free, or all you're digging for gold. During the verses, Cliff plays a simple note bass line as eighth notes, an approach that he utilized in other tunes like Who Made Who, for example. And for the Young brothers, rather than letting the chords ring out, they slash and mute the strings for the verse, just a couple behind-the-scenes music stuff. According to the official AC/DC website and most worldwide releases, it is Given, but on some albums, particularly Australian releases and also on the iTunes Store, it is sometimes spelled Given or Giving, spelled like what you see. Obvious sexual reference. This line has been argued to have been a Bond line. People say that this line is very similar to lyrics that you'd hear on their previous albums. The song thinks of this line and other lines like, she takes you down easy, going down to her knees, going down to the devil, down to 90 degrees, oh she's blowing me crazy till my ammunition is dry, received massive criticism from the feminists. This song has a similar style to Hell's Bells and features nearly the exact tempo, clocking it at 105 beats per minute, versus Hell's Bells, which had 107 beats per minute. This was another song that received massive criticism from the PRMC in the 1980s as one of their filthy 15 songs, unsuitable for children, due to the overt nature of the lyrics, like flying on a free flight, driving all night with my machinery, because I got the power, any hour, to show the man in me. They weren't granted their wish of content-specific ratings, but they did get warning stickers on the albums with explicit content. Although, as successful as the album was, I don't really think that affected the sales all that much, and I don't think AC/DC or the fans really cared. Probably AC/DC's biggest song, the title track. Angus Young said, Malcolm had the main riff for Back in Black for about 3 weeks. He came in one night and said, you got your cassette here? Can I put this down? It's driving me mad. I won't get any sleep until this is put on cassette. The funniest thing he said to me, what do you think? I don't know if it's crap or not. I don't know, end quote. I want to say Angus also said something along the lines of, well, if you don't want it, then I'll say I wrote it. Brian said, I don't think anybody writing lyrics could miss those riffs. You could have written anything and it would have sounded good. I think it was professionals meeting with a rank amateur like myself, and it just meshed. Just an accident. Just an amateur who thought, well, I better write these quick. The professionals had the gears oiled, and it all just fit perfectly. This song, just like what the idea for the album cover and name are about, this is of course a tribute to Bond. Brian recalled in a Mojo interview in 2009, they said it can't be morbid, it has to be for Bond, and it has to be a celebration. I thought, well, no pressure then. I just wrote what came to mind, which at that time seemed like mumbo jumbo. 9 lives, cat's eyes, abusing every one of them and running wild. The boys got it though. They saw Bond's life in that lyric. This was the first song they put down and possibly in the works before Bond's death, musically I mean. The single of the song was backed with What'd He Do for Money Honey, and it reached number 37 on the US Billboard Hot 100, number 51 on the US Billboard Top Tracks chart, and number 39 on the US Cashbox. In 2012, it reached number 1 on the UK Rock and Metal chart and the US Hard Rock Digital charts. And it reached 2 times platinum in Canada for selling over 80,000 copies of Music Canada for ringtones. There are a number of classic rock songs that offer memorable riffs plucked one note at a time, like Heartbreaker by Led Zeppelin, Breaking the Law by Judas Priest, or Day Tripper by the Beatles. This song is built entirely around bashed out chords. Brian Johnson told UK's Absolute Radio about the inspiration for this song, saying, the boys had a title, Malcolm and Angus said, listen, we got the song, it's called Shook Me All Night Long, that's what we want the song to be called. The chorus just fell into place, so I can't claim any credit on that thing. He also said, it was as quick as it had to be, which was that night. I guess I had to try and impress somebody. It was just a thing that came at the time, and I still think it's one of the greatest rock and roll riffs I'd ever heard in my life. Another Brian quote, a lot of them for the song, it was the first song I wrote with the guys and has a groovy beat that won't let you go. It has a special place in my heart and I still love to sing it on stage. To me, it might be one of the best rock songs ever written, if I do say so myself. In January of 2018, it was part of the Triple M's Ozest 100, the most Australian songs of all time, ranked at number 63. The song received massive criticism for possibly using Bond lyrics.
She told me to come, but I was already there.
Silver Smith, former girlfriend of Bond, said in an interview with Jesse Fink for his biography, Bond, The Last Highway, said, "I know for sure that was written at Gloucester Road back in '76. He wrote that in a letter to somebody, one of his grotty mates, just after we got back together, actually. He always kept notebooks and added and subtracted them and so on. He put in American Thighs even way back then because that was the market they were going to try and crack. So that was written a long time ago," end quote. Malcolm Dome, English journalist, claimed shortly before Bond died that Bond showed me his book of lyrics. He had sheets of lyrics that he kept on file, carried them around. He'd been showing me some of the ideas he'd been working on for Back in Black. Not the song Back in Black, but songs that were for the next album. There were a couple lines like, "She told me to come, but I was already there," which ended up in "You shook me all night long." That's a Bond lyric, and I saw it. I saw it written down. There were lyrics, lines used on Back in Black that Bond wrote. He wasn't credited, and to this day, no one's really sure what happened. I don't think he even got close to finishing the whole songs, but there are lines in there that I know, end quote. Although Angus Young denies the use of any Bond lyrics in the song. The song was released as the first single for the album. It reached number 35 on the charts, serving as their highest charting stateside single for years before being surpassed by Money Talks in 1990. The song was released a second time on Who Made Who in 1986, but only reached number 46 in the UK, and was backed with a live version of She's Got Balls from 1977 Bondi Live Saves gig and a 1983 live version of You Shook Me All Night Long. Some copies of the single were pressed incorrectly with Shake a Leg instead, which are now considered collector's items. 2 music videos were also released for the song. The first one was accompanied by a live-style promo video in the same manner of all those shot for Back in Black and can be found on the dual-disc version of that album. For the second version, David Mallet filmed a promo video featuring Brian in his trademark flat cap stomping around his hometown in Newcastle with Angus and Malcolm trailing him in schoolboy outfits. This is the most frequently seen version and culminates in an explosion of suggestion and flesh and some very nice-looking, scantily clad models, I will add. This is another song dedicated to Scott. The song name-checks various popular alcoholic beverages while also including a not-so-common name for whiskey, Sour Mash. The song is seen as bad taste to title a song after the former singer likely just died from alcohol poisoning, but Brian wanted to stay true to Scott's form by writing about topics consistent with AC/DC's ethos, and that includes drinking. Right before the solo, Johnson suggests to the listener, which is strange, because the song is about alcohol, not marijuana, unless I didn't get the memo that getting stoned also means drunk. Lastly, this is the B-side to Shook Me All Night Long. This is the most upbeat song on the otherwise mid-paced album. Shake a Leg means to perform a series of usually rhythmic bodily movements to music or to proceed or move quickly. The song is about an individual within society and refusing to conform or give into the high-class pressure around you and what people think of you, especially those with status. It also deals with the concept of being rebellious and having your own attitude and not really caring what other people think of you. The intro has Brian talking alongside the guitar. He said, "I thought it was just going to be a boozy chug song. Mal came up with the title saying, 'Air, Jono, we'll call it Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution.' I thought, that's a great one to even rhyme with. I'll never forget the start of it. I went to the recording booth, the intro starts and I hear, 'Brian, it's Mutt. Could you say something over that? Just talk.' I was smoking a tab at the time and you can hear it. I was going, 'Yeah, all you middlemen, I just did this Southern preacher thing. Honestly, it was one take. I never thought it was going to be on the record,' end quote. He also said, for some reason, middlemen were in the news at the time. The top guys weren't getting the blame, and the workforce weren't getting it either. It was the middlemen who were in this gray area. I must have picked up on it and just went from there," end quote. Now, for the idea of noise pollution, the idea, according to Malcolm, was, we were in London at the time, and there were all these problems with the old Marquee Club because it was in a built-up area, and there was this whole thing about noise pollution in the news. The environmental health thing said you couldn't have your stereo up loud after 11 at night. It all came from that," end quote. This was another single released from the album, backed with Hell's Bells, which is probably one of the most powerful singles released from any band, having 2 of my favorite AC/DC songs on one single. Lastly, this was the last song written for the album. At the end of their 5th week, the band had 9 tracks recorded. Atlantic Records, as well as the band's management, recommended they come up with one more song, so Malcolm and Angus wrote this in about 15 minutes.
and roll, yeah.
And that concludes the album. This album was huge. Within 2 weeks, it topped the UK chart in the US after a slow start, was certified platinum in October, where it began an incredible 13-month residency in the Billboard Top 10, number 4 to be specific. Since then, it has sold over 49 million copies worldwide. That makes it right now the second greatest selling album of all time, only behind Michael Jackson's Thriller. After the release of the album, Highway to Hell, If You Want Blood You Got It live album, and Let There Be Rock all re-entered the British charts, which made them the first time since the Beatles to have 4 albums in the British Top 100 at the same time. David Fricke reviewed the album for Rolling Stone in 1980, saying it's not only the best of AC/DC's 6 American albums, but the apex of heavy metal art, the first LP since Led Zeppelin II that captures all the blood, sweat, and arrogance of the genre. It was ranked at number 26 on Rolling Stone magazine's list of the 100 best albums of the 80s. It was number 77 on their list of the 500 greatest albums of all time, and even maintained that spot in 2012 reissued list. VH1 ranks it at number 82 on its top 100 albums. This has been Awesome Andrew telling you that AC/DC's Back in Black is an awesome album, and I hope to see you in another video.
Hey everyone, real quick before I close out of this video, I want to apologize again for the Hells Bells confusion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read directly from my notes, because maybe there was some mistranslation from the notes to the script. So I'm going to focus mostly on these 2 paragraphs right here. So the tolling of the bells came when Malcolm, during the mixing at New York Electric Lady Studios, Tony Platt dashed across the street to record a bell at a church in Loughborough. Okay, so that apparently is wrong, because Loughborough is in England, not New York. So that is the mistranslation there. But in Loughborough, there is a monument called the Carillon, dedicated to those who died during both World Wars. At the top of this 200-foot tower are 47 bells. The largest is the Denison Bell, which weighs 4 tons, made by J. Taylor and Sons. And supposedly, this is the one that was recorded by Tony Platt. Now, I don't know if this is the one that was affected with the pigeons, or if that's a whole different one. Like I said, there's a lot of discrepancy on what actual bell was recorded for the album. If J. Taylor and Sons made a replica of that bell that was used for the album, or if they used that version and a replica was used for when they went on tour. I apologize. I was really hoping that this would clear a lot of the confusion up, but unfortunately, apparently there was still a lot of confusion that went from whatever source I was looking at into the notes, and then of course from the notes to the script must have lost even more translation. So I apologize. I like to have my videos as accurate as possible, but unfortunately something happened in this video that prevented that from happening. So I guess just take what I said in the Hells Bells section with a grain of salt, because New York City is not in the same area as Loughborough, England. So I don't know. I don't know what to say there. Maybe Malcolm was heard this when they were mixing in England and not in New York. But the fact that it specifically says New York's Electric Lady Studios, I'm not sure. There's some miscommunication with the various sources that I used. I had a big stack of books too. I have a big stack of books and of course a bunch of websites. So I mean, this wasn't all just taken from one source, but just the mix of all the sources together must have led to some miscommunication. So once again, I apologize, and I hope that things are a little bit more accurate in my next one. If you do know what actually happened in the Hells Bells thing, please comment on that, and because I want to know. I want for you guys to come to me and know that what you're getting is as trustworthy information as you could possibly get, and I kind of feel like I failed you on this one. So yeah, please comment if you know the correct history here, so just so that way people who are watching the video, they can read that comment and say, okay, that's what's actually going on here. So thank you, and have a great day. Please subscribe if you haven't yet. Hit that bell if you haven't, no pun intended. Hit the YouTube bell so that way you'll know when new episodes are coming out. Subscribe to me on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. I have a Patreon set up where you guys can get a special little award for subscribing, where you get a blooper reel. I have a playlist, an unlisted playlist of blooper reels. So if that catches your interest, subscribe to that too. Like there's going to be a blooper reel for Hell's Bells. So if you want to hear me botch over some of my lines, although this Hell's Bells thing is kind of its own blooper, but extra bloopers, subscribe to Patreon as well. Like I said, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, I'm on all those, so definitely join me there. BitChute, just in case for some reason one of my videos, including this one, fails to be on YouTube for whatever reason, it will be backed up on BitChute. Now, naturally, you won't know this if this video is blocked on YouTube, but let's just say one of my other videos gets blocked on YouTube for some reason, like the Supertramp video did earlier this year. Check it out on BitChute or some of my other videos on BitChute. Everything I upload on YouTube, except for the blooper reel, is also on BitChute as well. In fact, BitChute has a couple more things because of that Breakfast in America video, which sadly is blocked worldwide on YouTube, but you can still enjoy that on BitChute, as well as any other videos. Definitely feel free to subscribe to that as well. And as always, I hope to see you in another video.